Today we'll be reacting to the Bernat Klein studio in Selkirk. This is one of those buildings I remember for years. I remember it from when I was at uni. It was one you studied. It's a really interesting building. It's this kind of beautiful if that can be used for brutalist, I think it can. It's really beautiful, small studio building set in the countryside in Selkirk. It's this really raw concrete aesthetic, which was typical of that, early 70s brutalist movement. It was by Peter Womersley, who, strangely for a kind of really well-known modernist and architect of his time, practiced extensively in the Scottish borders. So there's some real gems of buildings kind of dotted around the borders by Peter and his kind of team, which are beautiful. And this is one of these, it kind of floats. It was the textile studio for Bernat Klein. In a sense, it was all about that era. It was this kind of very stripped back, probably say kind of James Bond now, interior that was all about the colour and the texture that went in it from the pieces he produced, from the fabric, from the textiles. When you see photos of it at the time, the black and white ones, it looks very kind of grey and austere. But when you see some colour photos, what you see is these really beautiful, really vibrant textiles sitting, and just the counterpoint between, really heavy textured concrete, beautiful kind of delicate fabrics, and then at the same time this kind of concrete frame that sits really lightly, and most of it's infilled with glass. So it's just kind of three horizontal planes, the ground, the first, and the roof plane, where then everything in between just kind of disappears. I think it's amazing. It's recently been on the market. It was bought by a trust who are going to restore it and give public access again, which is phenomenal. It's one of those that's been in private hands for so long and fallen into disrepair to the extent that the amount to be invested is immense. But it's fantastic that someone's kind of been able to get a team together and backing from both kind of public bodies and Scottish Borders Council to save it. It's very much of its time. 1972, I think it was built. It's that kind of, I suppose, almost very typical brutalist thing in that it's based on material. So it's about that really heavy, textured concrete. When you look at it from the outside, you can see the markings on the outside of those kind of horizontal planes. It's about these kind of floating planes that have empty space between them. Normally you see these in urban settings. So the real big brutalist buildings that you think of, things like Centrepoint in London, kind of some of the work of Goldfinger, Lasden, all those kind of guys, they're always seen in really urban environments. But when you see this and it sits in a kind of open parkland almost, surrounded by trees, actually it sits so well in nature, because you've got texture, you've got this kind of horizontal element, but then you can see through it, so the trees almost permeate it. So if you look from one side of it, you look through it and you can see the trees on the other. In some ways really similar, obviously a much smaller scale, but we've just finished a project in Halifax, which was a 1974 brutalist office building that was, huge, heavy, solid, visible concrete, with this beautiful light bronze curtain walling wrapped around it. And there's a playfulness between that solid and the veil element. And I think you see that here as well. I think at its time, something like this would have been so complicated. It's within its context, building it, there's a challenge there. There was a brutalist movement, so there was some push for it, but typically the Scottish Borders are known, and most councils are known for being more conservative. So to have a client that was willing to push for something so complex and so out of keeping in a sense with its surroundings, that goes against the grain of what would typically be supported in the Borders. The complexity of building these things, you've got essentially huge cast concrete plates balanced on much thinner columns that get lighter as it moves up the building. The top floor, the roof level kind of projects out much more than the lower level, so it's much bigger. And it's built in an area where it's not built in central London or central city, somewhere where they were doing lots of these. So you had to get a very specific workforce who were able to work with it, to understand it, to kind of know what was looked for. Years and years ago, I worked on a project in Kelso, another town in the Scottish Borders, where the health centre in the town was a Peter Womersley building, and we had to extend it. And it was very different from this. It was all about curves. It was a really sinuous and kind of organic plan. Again, really beautiful and sat in its setting so well, but was too small and needed extended. So I've been able to work on one of these buildings in the past to kind of modernise and extend it.
What would you have done differently, and would you have had do you want your office in a building like that?
Do you know, I think I wouldn't have done anything to this one. I think it's just an absolute classic. I must admit, our Borders office is probably only about 20 minutes from here, and there was that point when you saw it in the market that you thought, I wonder if could we secure that? Could we move? What an amazing setting for an architect studio. I suppose ultimately I'm really glad that it's been bought by a trust who are going to kind of restore it and also turn it into something accessible again that more people can see it. But yeah, I don't think I would change this one at all.